In the heart of Los Angeles, where palm trees swayed gently against the backdrop of a bustling city skyline, there stood an establishment that was more than just a restaurant. It was an experience, a place where luxury met exclusivity, and every detail was crafted to perfection. This was Elysian Dining, one of the most sought-after eateries in town. Its reputation wasn't built merely on its exquisite menu or its elegant ambiance. It was whispered about for being discreet, private, and frequented by some of Hollywood's biggest names. The man behind this culinary gem was none other than Keanu Reeves, the beloved actor whose name carried weight not only because of his legendary performances but also because of his unassuming nature. Unlike many celebrities who dabble in business ventures purely for profit, Keanu had poured his heart into creating Elysian Dining. He envisioned it as a sanctuary where people could escape the chaos of their lives and indulge in moments of pure bliss. Every tablecloth, every piece of silverware, every light fixture, it all bore the mark of someone who cared deeply about crafting something meaningful. Despite owning such a prestigious venue, Keanu rarely stepped foot inside when it was operational. His humility kept him away from basking in the glory of his creation. Instead, he trusted a team of seasoned professionals to manage day-to-day operations while he focused on what he loved most: acting. To him, Elysian Dining wasn't a vanity project. It was a passion born out of his love for food, design, and bringing joy to others. And yet, even though his face graced countless magazines and billboards worldwide, few outside the inner circle knew that he owned the place. That anonymity suited him perfectly. On this particular evening, however, Keanu decided to break his routine. After wrapping up a long day of filming, he found himself craving something different. Not necessarily food, but an atmosphere. A chance to step away from the whirlwind of fame and simply exist as a regular person for a little while. So, without fanfare or entourage, he slipped into his favorite worn leather jacket, paired it with a pair of faded jeans, and headed toward Elysian Dining. As he approached the entrance, the golden glow spilling out onto the sidewalk caught his eye. The restaurant sat nestled between towering skyscrapers, its facade adorned with ivy and soft string lights that gave it an almost magical quality. Valets stood ready to assist arriving guests, though Keanu opted to park his motorcycle a block away. He preferred walking, savoring the cool night air and the distant hum of the city around him. When he reached the door, a hostess greeted him with a polite smile. "Good evening, sir," she said, her tone warm but professional. She glanced at him briefly, clearly not recognizing the man standing before her. Without hesitation, Keanu replied, "Hi, I have a reservation under my name." There was no pretense in his voice, no attempt to draw attention to himself. He simply wanted to enjoy a quiet meal like anyone else. The hostess checked her list, nodded, and gestured for him to follow her. As they weaved through the dimly lit dining area, Keanu couldn't help but admire how seamlessly everything came together. The tables were spaced generously apart, ensuring privacy for each guest. Soft jazz music played in the background, creating an ambiance that felt both intimate and sophisticated. Candles flickered atop pristine white tablecloths, casting gentle shadows across the room. It was exactly as he'd imagined it would be, an oasis amidst the noise of the world. He was led to a cozy corner table, slightly tucked away from the main flow of activity. It was perfect for someone looking to blend in rather than stand out. Settling into his seat, Keanu allowed himself a small smile. For once, he wasn't Keanu Reeves, the action hero or the cultural icon. Here he was just another patron, eager to savor the fruits of his labor without any distractions. Little did he know, this decision to visit unnoticed would set off a chain of events neither he nor anyone else could have predicted. The restaurant buzzed with life, filled with patrons dressed in designer suits and gowns, sipping champagne and exchanging laughter. But Keanu remained content in his simplicity, unaware that his presence and his choice of attire was about to spark a confrontation that would leave a lasting impression on everyone involved. As he scanned the menu, waiting patiently for a waiter to arrive, Keanu felt a sense of peace wash over him. This was his world, his creation, even if no one else realized it yet. What he didn't anticipate was how quickly that sense of calm would be disrupted, and how profoundly it would change the course of the evening. The clinking of glasses and the murmur of polite conversation filled the air, as Keanu sat quietly at his corner table, perusing the menu with genuine interest. He had always been proud of the dishes served at Elysian dining. Each item was carefully curated by a team of world-class chefs, blending flavors that danced on the palate while maintaining an elegance that matched the restaurant's ambiance. Tonight, he felt a particular sense of pride knowing that this culinary masterpiece existed because of his vision. As he scanned the selections, a young man approached his table. This was Alex, a recent addition to the staff who had joined just weeks earlier. Dressed in a crisp black vest and tie, Alex carried himself with an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance. His sharp features and neatly styled hair gave him the appearance of someone determined to climb the ranks quickly. However, beneath that polished exterior lay a streak of judgmental behavior, a trait that hadn't gone unnoticed by some of his coworkers but hadn't yet caused any major issues. When Alex arrived at Keanu's table, his expression shifted almost imperceptibly. At first glance, he seemed professional enough, offering a curt nod as he pulled out his notepad. But then his eyes flickered over Keanu's casual attire, the leather jacket, the faded jeans, and something changed. A subtle sneer tugged at the corners of his mouth, though he tried to mask it. To Alex, Keanu didn't fit the image of the typical Elysian dining guest. In his mind, luxury restaurants like this were reserved for people who exuded wealth and sophistication, not someone who looked like they'd just rolled off a movie set. Or worse, a motorcycle. "Do you have a reservation?" Alex asked, his tone clipped and dismissive. The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. It wasn't so much what he said, but how he said it, his voice laced with skepticism, as if daring Keanu to prove he belonged there. Keanu glanced up from the menu, meeting Alex's gaze with calm indifference. There was no hint of irritation or defensiveness in his demeanor. Instead, he simply nodded and replied, "Yes, under Reeves." His tone was polite, measured, and devoid of any attempt to assert authority. If anything, he seemed amused by the situation, though Alex failed to notice. Alex flipped through his reservation book, his movements deliberate and exaggerated. When he found the name, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Ah, yes," he muttered, barely concealing his disdain. "Right this way." He gestured vaguely toward the table Keanu was already seated at, as if surprised the hostess had placed him correctly. Then, without waiting for further instruction, Alex thrust a menu into Keanu's hands and turned away slightly, already signaling to another server nearby. For a moment, Keanu watched Alex retreat, his brow furrowing ever so slightly. He wasn't offended, not really, but he couldn't help but find the interaction intriguing. It wasn't often that someone treated him with such obvious disregard, especially in a setting where hospitality was supposed to reign supreme. Still, he shrugged it off, reminding himself that this was exactly why he'd chosen to come incognito. He wanted to experience the restaurant as a regular patron would, flaws and all. But Alex wasn't finished. As the evening wore on, his attitude only grew more condescending. When Keanu requested a glass of water, Alex rolled his eyes before walking away, muttering under his breath about basic requests. When Keanu hesitated between two entrees and asked for recommendations, Alex responded with thinly veiled sarcasm, saying, "Well, sir, I suppose it depends on whether you're looking for something refined." The emphasis on the last word left little doubt about what Alex thought of his customer's taste level. At one point, when Keanu inquired about the wine list, Alex let out an audible sigh as though the question itself was an inconvenience. "The sommelier will be happy to assist you," he said dryly, "though I must warn you our selection caters to those with a discerning palate." The jab was subtle but unmistakable, and several nearby diners exchanged glances, sensing the tension brewing. Despite the escalating rudeness, Keanu remained unfazed. He continued to engage politely, asking thoughtful questions and expressing gratitude whenever Alex deigned to respond. Part of him was curious to see how far the waiter would take his behavior. Would Alex eventually realize who he was dealing with, or would he double down on his assumptions, blinded by prejudice? What made the encounter even more fascinating was the stark contrast between Alex's treatment of Keanu and his interactions with other patrons. Moments after leaving Keanu's table, Alex approached a nearby couple dressed in designer outfits. His entire demeanor transformed. He smiled warmly, offered effusive compliments, and went out of his way to ensure their experience was nothing short of perfect. Watching this shift, Keanu couldn't help but chuckle softly to himself. It was almost comical, the way appearances dictated perception. Meanwhile, Keanu's patience began to pay off in unexpected ways. Other servers working nearby started noticing the dynamic unfolding at his table. One waitress, Maria, shot Alex a disapproving look as she passed by, clearly aware of his poor conduct. Another bartender whispered to a colleague, "Isn't that guy kind of famous? He looks familiar." Yet no one intervened, leaving Keanu to navigate the situation alone. As dessert menus were distributed, Alex returned to Keanu's table, his expression sour. "Can I tempt you with our signature chocolate soufflé?" he asked, his tone dripping with insincerity. "It's quite popular among our discerning clientele." Keanu looked up, his dark eyes locking onto Alex's. For the first time that evening, there was a flicker of something in his gaze, a quiet intensity that caught Alex off guard. Setting the menu aside, Keanu leaned back in his chair, studying the young man before him. "You know," Keanu began, his voice calm but firm, "I've heard a lot of interesting things about this place. People say it's one of the best restaurants in the city. But do you know what makes a restaurant truly great?" Alex blinked, caught off guard by the sudden question. The food, I guess," he stammered, unsure where this was going. Keanu shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "It's the service. How you treat your guests. Every single one of them, no matter what they're wearing or how they look." There was a long pause as Alex processed these words. For the briefest moment, uncertainty flickered across his face. But before he could respond, Keanu added, almost casually, "By the way, do you happen to know who owns this restaurant?" Alex froze, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I assume it's some rich guy," he finally managed, his voice wavering. "Someone who, Keanu interrupted gently, leaning forward just enough to make his presence known. "That rich guy happens to be me," he said, his tone still calm but carrying an undeniable weight. The room seemed to hold its breath. Alex's face paled, his earlier bravado crumbling in an instant. And in that moment, the balance of power shifted entirely, setting the stage for a confrontation that neither of them would soon forget. The air between Keanu and Alex grew thick with tension, as though the entire restaurant had paused to witness the unfolding drama. Alex stood frozen, his pen hovering awkwardly in midair, his face draining of color. For a moment, it seemed like he might drop the notepad altogether. The confidence that had fueled his earlier condescension evaporated instantly, replaced by sheer panic. Keanu, however, remained calm and composed. He didn't raise his voice or adopt an accusatory tone. Instead, he leaned back slightly in his chair, his piercing gaze still fixed on Alex. There was no malice in his expression, just a quiet intensity that demanded accountability. It was clear that this wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about teaching a lesson, one that Alex wouldn't soon forget. "You judge me based on my clothes," Keanu continued, his voice steady, but carrying enough weight to make Alex squirm. "You decided I didn't belong here before you even knew who I was. Does that sound fair?" Alex stammered, his words tumbling out in a jumbled mess. I didn't mean, it's just..." He trailed off, unable to find the right explanation. His mind raced, trying to piece together how he had misread the situation so completely. All those sarcastic remarks, all those dismissive gestures, they replayed in his head like a loop, each one amplifying his embarrassment. Keanu let the silence, stretch for a beat longer, allowing Alex to fully absorb the gravity of what had happened. Then in a softer tone, he added, "Look, I get it. This is a fancy place. People come here expecting luxury and they want everything to feel perfect. But hospitality isn't just about serving food or pouring wine. It's about making people feel welcome, no matter who they are or what they're wearing." Alex nodded mechanically, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had spent weeks rehearsing the art of customer service, memorizing scripts about creating memorable experiences for every guest. Yet here he was, failing at the very thing he'd been hired to do. Worse still, he had offended the owner of the restaurant, a man whose name was synonymous with kindness and humility. "I'm sorry," Alex finally blurted out, his voice cracking under the pressure. "I didn't know it was you." "If I had known," Keanu raised a hand, cutting him off gently. "That's exactly the point," he said. "You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect. Whether I'm Keanu Reeves or just some guy off the street, I deserve the same level of care as anyone else who walks through that door, and so does everyone else." The simplicity of Keanu's words hit Alex like a freight train. He realized now that his behavior hadn't just been rude, it had been hypocritical. He prided himself on being professional, yet he had allowed his own biases to cloud his judgment. In that moment, he felt smaller than he ever had before, not because Keanu was famous, but because he had failed to live up to the standards he claimed to value. As the truth sank in, Alex's shoulders slumped, and he looked down at the floor, unable to meet Keanu's gaze. "I messed up," he admitted quietly. "I really messed up." To his surprise, Keanu smiled faintly, the corners of his mouth curling upward in a gesture of understanding. "We all make mistakes," he said. "What matters is what you do next. Are you going to learn from this, or are you going to keep treating people differently based on what they look like?" Alex swallowed hard, his throat dry. He wanted to say something, anything, that would undo the damage he'd caused. But words felt inadequate now. Instead, he nodded slowly, his chest tightening with regret. "I'll do better," he promised. "I swear." For a brief moment, the two men sat in silence, the weight of the exchange hanging heavily between them. Around them, the restaurant buzzed with activity, oblivious to the private reckoning taking place in the corner. Servers moved gracefully between tables, delivering dishes with practiced precision. Couples laughed over candlelit meals, their conversations punctuated by the soft clink of glasses. Yet none of it mattered to Alex in that moment. All he could think about was how close he had come to ruining everything. For himself, for the restaurant, and for the reputation of everyone involved. Finally, Keanu broke the silence. "Good," he said simply. "Start with tonight. Make sure every guest leaves feeling valued, including me." His tone was lighter now, almost playful, as if giving Alex a chance to redeem himself. Relieved but still shaken, Alex straightened up, his professionalism kicking back into gear. "Yes, sir," he replied, his voice steadier this time. "Can I bring you the chocolate soufflé? On the house, of course." Keanu chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No need to go overboard," he said. "Just bring me the check when I'm ready. And maybe try smiling a little more. It suits you." With that, Alex turned and hurried away, his footsteps quick and purposeful. As he retreated, he couldn't help but glance back at Keanu, marveling at the actor's composure. Most people, in his position, would have demanded an apology in front of the entire staff, or worse, fired him on the spot. But Keanu had chosen a different path, one rooted in empathy and understanding. Word of the incident spread quickly among the restaurant's employees. By the time Alex returned to the kitchen to fetch Keanu's bill, whispers had already begun circulating. One of the sous chefs leaned in close, her eyebrows raised in curiosity. "Is it true?" she asked. "Did you just insult Keanu Reeves?" Alex groaned, burying his face in his hands. "It's worse than that," he muttered. "He basically gave me a life lesson while I served him dinner." The chef laughed, though there was a hint of admiration in her voice. "Well, if anyone can teach you how to be humble, it's him," she said, Just don't screw it up again. Back in the dining area, Keanu finished his meal, savoring the flavors of the dish he'd ordered, a perfectly cooked filet mignon, paired with seasonal vegetables. Despite the earlier confrontation, he felt oddly satisfied, not because he had exposed Alex's mistake, but because he had turned it into an opportunity for growth. In his experience, real change only happened when people were willing to confront their flaws head-on, and tonight, Alex had taken the first step toward becoming better. As Keanu prepared to leave, he glanced around the restaurant one last time, taking in the beauty of the space he had created. Every detail, the flickering candles, the polished silverware, the soft hum of conversation, was a testament to his vision. But more importantly, it was a reminder of why he had built Elysian Dining in the first place: to bring people together, to create moments of joy, and to remind them that kindness always mattered more than appearances. And as he stepped out into the cool Los Angeles night, disappearing into the shadows once again, Keanu couldn't help but smile. Tonight had been unpredictable, challenging, and ultimately rewarding, a microcosm of life itself. After the dust had settled from the confrontation, Keanu made his way to the restaurant's private office, a small but tastefully decorated space tucked away behind the kitchen. It was a room few employees ever entered, reserved for moments that required privacy and reflection. As he sat down in the leather chair behind the desk, he gestured for Alex to take a seat across from him. The young waiter hesitated for a moment, unsure if he was walking into a formal reprimand or something else entirely, but Keanu's calm demeanor put him slightly at ease. "Relax," Keanu said with a reassuring smile. "This isn't about punishing you. I just want to talk." Alex nodded nervously, perching on the edge of the chair as though ready to bolt at any second. His hands fidgeted in his lap, and his eyes darted around the room, taking in the framed photos on the wall, snapshots of Keanu posing with chefs, staff members, and even some celebrities who had dined at Elysian Dining. For the first time, Alex truly understood the significance of where he worked and how much responsibility came with it. "So," Keanu began, leaning forward slightly, "tell me about yourself. Why did you decide to work here?" The question caught Alex off guard. He had expected anger, disappointment, maybe even a lecture about professionalism. But this felt personal. Hesitant at first, Alex cleared his throat and started speaking. He explained how he had grown up in a working-class neighborhood, raised by a single mother who worked tirelessly to provide for their family. From a young age, he had dreamed of escaping the confines of his circumstances, envisioning a future where he could rub shoulders with the wealthy and influential. When he landed the job at Elysian Dining, it felt like a stepping stone toward achieving that dream. But somewhere along the way, Alex admitted, his voice faltering, "I got caught up in trying to impress people instead of focusing on what really matters. I thought treating guests like royalty meant catering only to those who looked the part. I never stopped to think about whether I was being fair or kind." Keanu listened intently, nodding occasionally as Alex spoke. There was no judgment in his expression, only understanding. When Alex finished, Keanu leaned back in his chair and let out a thoughtful sigh. "You know," he said, "a lot of people would say we're very different, you and me. You grew up wanting to climb the ladder while I've always tried to stay grounded. But the truth is, we're not so different after all." Alex furrowed his brow, confused. "What do you mean?" he asked. Keanu smiled faintly, his gaze distant as if recalling memories long past. "When I was younger, I faced my share of rejection too. People judged me based on my looks, my background, my accent. They told me I didn't belong in Hollywood, that I wasn't good enough to make it big. And honestly, sometimes I believed them. But then I realized something important. Success isn't about proving yourself to others. It's about staying true to who you are and treating people with respect, no matter where they come from." He paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. "That's why I built this place, to create a space where everyone feels valued, regardless of their status or appearance. It's not just about serving great food, it's about building connections, Every guest who walks through those doors deserves to feel like they matter. That's what hospitality is all about. Alex sat silently, absorbing every word. For the first time, he saw the bigger picture, the purpose behind Elysian dining and the values it stood for. It wasn't just a restaurant. It was a philosophy, a way of life. And he had almost ruined it with his arrogance. "I'm sorry," Alex said again, his voice trembling with sincerity. "I don't know what else to say except that I'll do better. I promise." Keanu nodded, satisfied with the response. "Apologies are a good start," he said, "but actions speak louder than words. What happened tonight doesn't have to define you. Use this as a chance to grow, to become the kind of person who lifts others up instead of tearing them down. To drive the point home." Keanu shared a story from his own life. He recounted the early days of his career, when he struggled to find steady work and often relied on friends for support. There were times when he doubted himself, wondering if he'd ever achieve his dreams. But through it all, he held on to one principle: kindness costs nothing, but its impact can be priceless. "There was this one guy who used to manage a coffee shop near my apartment," Keanu recalled. "Whenever I walked in, he greeted me with a smile, even though I probably looked like I hadn't slept in days. He didn't care that I was broke or struggling. He just treated me like a human being. Those little acts of kindness kept me going during some of my darkest moments. And now, whenever I interact with someone, I try to pay that forward." By the time Keanu finished his story, Alex's eyes were glistening with unshed tears. He had never imagined that the man sitting across from him, someone whose face graced movie screens worldwide, had faced such challenges. Suddenly, his own struggles seemed insignificant in comparison. Yet rather than making him feel small, Keanu's vulnerability inspired him. It reminded him that everyone, no matter how successful or famous, carries scars from their journey. As the conversation drew to a close, Keanu stood up and extended his hand. "Thank you for listening," he said warmly. "And thank you for being willing to change. I believe in you, Alex. Don't let me, or yourself, down." Alex shook Keanu's hand, feeling a renewed sense of purpose surge through him. For the first time in weeks, maybe even months, he felt genuinely motivated to improve, not just as a server, but as a person. As he left the office and returned to the dining floor, he carried with him a newfound determination to embody the values Keanu had spoken about. Over the next few days, subtle changes began to ripple through Elysian dining. Alex threw himself into his work with a level of enthusiasm that surprised both his coworkers and supervisors. He greeted every guest with a genuine smile, regardless of how they dressed or carried themselves. He went out of his way to anticipate their needs, offering recommendations and ensuring their experience was nothing short of exceptional. Even the most demanding patrons couldn't help but notice the shift in his attitude. Word of Alex's transformation spread quickly among the staff. At first, some were skeptical, assuming it was just a temporary act to save face. But as the weeks passed, it became clear that his change was authentic. During team meetings, he openly shared what he had learned from Keanu, encouraging his colleagues to adopt the same mindset. "We're not just servers," he told them. "We're ambassadors of this restaurant's values. Let's make sure every guest leaves feeling like they belong here." His words resonated deeply with the team, sparking a collective effort to elevate the standard of service across the board. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted subtly, but noticeably. Conversations between staff members grew more collaborative, and interactions with guests became warmer and more engaging. Even the regulars, who prided themselves on noticing even the smallest details, remarked on the improvement. Meanwhile, Keanu continued to visit Elysian dining occasionally, always choosing a quiet corner table where he could observe unnoticed. Each time he noticed the positive changes taking root, not just in Alex but in the entire staff. It filled him with pride to see how one conversation had sparked a ripple effect, reminding him once again of the power of empathy and leadership. One evening, as Keanu prepared to leave after another satisfying meal, Alex approached his table with a wide grin. "Thank you," he said earnestly, "for everything. I wouldn't be here without you." Keanu chuckled softly, waving off the gratitude. You did the hard work, he replied. I just pointed you in the right direction. As they exchanged a brief handshake, Keanu knew that the lessons of that night would linger far beyond the walls of Elysian dining. They were seeds planted in fertile ground, destined to grow and inspire others in ways neither of them could fully predict. And, in that knowledge, Keanu found a quiet satisfaction, one that reminded him why he had embarked on this journey in the first place. Weeks turned into months, and the transformation at Elysian dining became undeniable. What had started as a single moment of reckoning between Keanu and Alex blossomed into a cultural shift that permeated every corner of the restaurant. The staff, inspired by Alex's newfound dedication, began to approach their roles with renewed energy and purpose. Conversations in the break room revolved less around gossip or complaints and more around how to create unforgettable experiences for guests. Even the subtlest gestures, like remembering a regular's favorite drink or offering an extra dessert on someone's birthday, became second nature. For Alex, the change wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. He found himself reflecting on his interactions throughout the day, constantly asking if he could have done better. At first, this level of self-awareness felt exhausting, like carrying a weight he couldn't put down. But over time, it became liberating. Each small act of kindness, from helping a frazzled parent juggle a stroller and menu to calming down a guest upset about a mix-up in their order, filled him with a sense of fulfillment he'd never experienced before. For the first time in his life, Alex understood what it meant to take pride in his work, not because of external validation, but because of the impact it had on others. Keanu noticed these changes too, though he rarely mentioned them directly. During his occasional visits, he would sit quietly in his usual spot, observing the ebb and flow of the dining room. He saw servers moving with purpose, their smiles genuine rather than rehearsed. He watched as hostesses greeted guests warmly, making each person feel like they were stepping into a special world created just for them. And most importantly, he witnessed Alex thriving, not as someone trying to climb the ladder, but as someone who genuinely cared about the people around him. One evening, during one of Keanu's visits, Alex approached his table with a tray holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. "Compliments of the house," he said with a grin, placing the drinks carefully on the table. Then, lowering his voice slightly, he added, "I wanted to thank you again for everything. You've changed my life." Keanu looked up from the menu he'd been perusing and smiled. "You're doing all the hard work," he replied lightly. "I'm just glad to see it paying off." Alex shook his head, unwilling to let Keanu deflect the credit so easily. "No, really," he insisted. "Before that night, I thought success was about looking good in front of the right people. Now, I know it's about being good for everyone. That's something you taught me, and I'll never forget it." The sincerity in Alex's voice struck a chord with Keanu. It reminded him of why he had opened Elysian dining in the first place. To create a space where people felt valued, whether they were sitting at a table or working behind the scenes. In many ways, Alex's journey mirrored the restaurant's mission, a testament to the idea that growth often stems from moments of discomfort and reflection. As word of the improved service spread, Elysian dining gained even more acclaim. Patrons began leaving glowing reviews online, praising not only the food but also the warmth of the staff. One review read, "This isn't just a meal, it's an experience. The team here makes you feel like family, and that's rare in a city like LA." Another wrote, "From the moment we walked in, we were treated like royalty, not because we wore fancy clothes, but because they truly care about their guests." These accolades didn't go unnoticed by the restaurant's management, who decided to implement new training programs focused on empathy and customer connection. Alex, having proven himself as a leader among his peers, was asked to help lead workshops for new hires. At first, the idea intimidated him. He still remembered vividly how close he had come to losing his job. But he soon realized that sharing his story could inspire others to avoid the same mistakes. During one such workshop, Alex stood nervously, in front of a group of trainees clutching a notebook filled with talking points. "Hi, everyone," he began, his voice wavering slightly. "My name's Alex. and I've been working here for about 6 months now. Some of you might already know me. But what you probably don't know is that I almost ruined my career within the first few weeks. A ripple of surprise moved through the room as Alex recounted the infamous night when he insulted Keanu Reeves without realizing who he was. He didn't sugarcoat the details, describing his arrogance and the harsh lesson he learned about judging others based on appearances. When he finished, the room was silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Finally, one trainee raised her hand. "So, what happened after that?" she asked cautiously. Alex smiled, his confidence returning. "Keanu could have fired me on the spot," he said, "but instead he chose to teach me something. He reminded me that hospitality isn't about treating people differently, based on what they look like or how much money they have. It's about making sure everyone feels welcome, respected, and valued. That's the standard we're aiming for, here." By the end of the session, the trainees left feeling inspired and slightly intimidated by the high expectations. But Alex knew that setting the bar high was essential. If he could rise to the challenge, so could they. Meanwhile, Keanu continued to balance his dual roles as a global icon and a humble restaurateur. While the public celebrated him for his films and philanthropy, those closest to him knew that his true passion lay in creating meaningful connections. Whether it was through his movies, his charitable efforts, or Elysian dining, Keanu believed in the power of kindness to transform lives, including his own. On one particularly quiet evening, Keanu sat alone at his usual table, sipping a glass of red wine and watching the restaurant hum with life. Maria, one of the veteran servers, approached him with a warm smile. "You've done something amazing here," she said softly. "Not just with the food or the decor, but with the way you've shaped the culture. Everyone feels like they're part of something bigger." Keanu chuckled, brushing off the compliment. "It's not me," he said. "It's all of you. You're the ones bringing this place to life." Maria shook her head, refusing to let him dismiss the impact he'd had. "Maybe," she conceded. "But it takes a certain kind of leader to set the tone. You've shown us that success isn't about titles or accolades. It's about lifting others up. And that's something we'll carry with us forever." Her words lingered in Keanu's mind long after she walked away. They reminded him of why he had chosen to remain involved in Elysian dining, even as his acting career demanded more of his time. It wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about fostering a community where people could thrive, not just professionally, but personally. As the night wore on, Keanu reflected on the countless stories unfolding within the restaurants. There were couples celebrating anniversaries, families reuniting after years apart, friends laughing over shared plates. Each moment was unique, yet they all shared a common thread: the desire to connect, to belong, to be seen. And in those fleeting hours, Elysian dining became more than just a restaurant. It became a haven for humanity. When Keanu finally rose from his seat and prepared to leave, Alex intercepted him near the entrance. "Hey boss," he said, using the term jokingly. "Got a minute?" Keanu nodded, curious. "What's up?" Alex hesitated for a moment, then pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "I wrote this for you," he explained, handing it over. It's kind of a thank you note. I figured it was time I said it properly." Keanu unfolded the paper and scanned the neatly written lines. It was heartfelt and raw, expressing gratitude not just for the second chance Alex had been given, but for the lessons that had reshaped his perspective on life. As he read, a soft smile spread across his face. "This means a lot," Keanu said, folding the note and tucking it into his jacket. "Thank you, Alex. Keep doing what you're doing. You're making a difference." With that, Keanu stepped out into the cool Los Angeles night, disappearing into the shadows once again. Behind him, the golden glow of Elysian dining continued to shine brightly, a beacon of hope, connection, and redemption. And somewhere inside, Alex stood tall, knowing that he had played a role in keeping that light alive. Months passed, and Elysian dining solidified its reputation not just as a culinary gem, but as a place where people came to feel genuinely cared for. The transformation that had begun with Keanu's quiet intervention rippled outward, touching every aspect of the restaurant's operations. From the way servers greeted guests at the door to how chefs meticulously plated each dish, there was an unmistakable sense of pride and purpose in everything they did. It wasn't merely about serving meals, it was about creating moments. Small, fleeting experiences that lingered long after the plates were cleared. For Alex, the journey had been nothing short of transformative. What started as a humiliating mistake became the catalyst for personal growth. He no longer saw himself as someone striving to climb a ladder or impress others. Instead, he embraced his role as a connector, someone who could make even the most ordinary evening extraordinary through kindness and attentiveness. His colleagues admired him, not because he was perfect, but because he was honest about his imperfections and worked tirelessly to improve. One evening, during a particularly busy dinner service, a young couple arrived at the restaurant looking flustered. They were celebrating their 5th wedding anniversary, but things hadn't gone according to plan. Their babysitter had canceled last minute, leaving them scrambling to find alternative arrangements. Exhausted and stressed, they walked into Elysian, dining hoping for a relaxing meal but unsure if they'd be able to fully enjoy themselves. Alex greeted them warmly, immediately sensing their tension. After seating them at a cozy table near the window, he knelt down beside them and asked if everything was okay. At first, the couple hesitated, reluctant to burden a stranger with their troubles. But something about Alex's genuine concern put them at ease, and they shared their story. Without missing a beat, Alex sprang into action. He arranged for the kitchen staff to prepare a special dessert with "Happy Anniversary" written in chocolate sauce. He coordinated with the sommelier to pair their meal with complimentary wines, ensuring each course felt celebratory. And when the couple mentioned they missed seeing their toddler, Alex discreetly brought out a tablet loaded with cartoons, setting it up at a nearby table so they could check in on their child via video call. By the end of the night, tears glistened in the wife's eyes as she thanked Alex profusely. "We weren't sure we'd have a good time tonight," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "But you made this night unforgettable." Stories like this became commonplace at Elysian dining. Guests often left raving not just about the food but about the human connections they formed while dining there. Word-of-mouth praise spread like wildfire, drawing in new patrons eager to experience the magic for themselves. Local critics began, referring to the restaurant as more than a meal, it's an embrace. Behind the scenes, Keanu continued to play a quiet yet pivotal role. Though he rarely interfered with day-to-day operations, his presence loomed large in the values the staff upheld. During occasional visits, he would sit unobtrusively in his corner table, observing the interactions between employees and guests. When he noticed areas for improvement, he offered gentle suggestions rather than directives, empowering the team to take ownership of their work. One such suggestion led to the creation of a unique tradition at Elysian dining: the guest reflection journal. Placed discreetly near the exit, the journal invited patrons to share their thoughts, memories, or even drawings inspired by their visit. Some entries were brief, a simple "thank you" scrawled hastily before rushing out the door. Others were more elaborate, detailing life-changing conversations or proposals that unfolded over candlelit dinners. Over time, the journal grew into a treasure trove of stories, each one a testament to the impact of thoughtful hospitality. When Alex stumbled upon the journal one slow afternoon, he spent hours flipping through its pages, marveling at the depth of emotion captured within. One entry stood out to him. "Tonight reminded me why I fell in love with my partner all those years ago. Thank you for giving us space to reconnect." Reading those words filled him with a profound sense of fulfillment. This was the legacy he wanted to leave behind, not wealth or fame, but meaningful connections that enriched people's lives. As the months rolled on, Elysian dining garnered national attention. Food critics hailed it as one of the best restaurants in Los Angeles, praising not only its menu but also its unparalleled service. Yet what truly set it apart was the intangible warmth that permeated every interaction. It was the kind of place where strangers became friends, where milestones were celebrated, and where everyday moments turned into cherished memories. Keanu watched all of this unfold with quiet satisfaction. He knew that success wasn't measured by accolades or revenue. It was reflected in the smiles of satisfied guests and the pride of dedicated employees. For him, Elysian dining represented something far greater than a business venture. It was proof that kindness, humility, and empathy could create ripples of positive change that extended far beyond the confines of a single establishment. On a crisp autumn evening, Keanu decided to host a small gathering for the staff. It wasn't a formal event, just a casual dinner to celebrate their hard work and dedication. As everyone gathered around a long communal table, adorned with flickering candles, Keanu stood up to speak. "I want to thank each and every one of you," he began, his voice warm and sincere. "This restaurant isn't mine, it's ours. Together we've built something truly special. You've shown me and our guests that hospitality is about more than serving food. It's about making people feel seen, heard, and valued." The room erupted into applause, followed by heartfelt cheers. Alex, seated near the front, couldn't help but grin as he glanced around at his coworkers. They had come so far since that fateful night when he had insulted the very man standing before them. Now, they were a team united by shared values and a commitment to excellence. After the speeches and laughter subsided, Keanu pulled Alex aside for a private moment. "You know," he said, his tone light but earnest, "you've accomplished something remarkable here. You've taken a mistake and turned it into a lesson. Not just for yourself, but for everyone around you." Alex nodded, his chest swelling. "With gratitude. I couldn't have done it without you," he replied. "You didn't just give me a second chance, you showed me what it means to lead with compassion." Keanu smiled, placing a hand on Alex's shoulder. "That's the thing about leadership," he said. "It's not about being perfect. It's about inspiring others to be better versions of themselves. And you've done exactly that." As the night drew to a close, Keanu stepped outside and looked back at the glowing windows of Elysian dining. Inside, laughter echoed, glasses clinked, and stories unfolded. It was a living, breathing testament to the power of kindness, a reminder that even the smallest acts of empathy could leave an indelible mark on the world. And as Keanu walked away, disappearing into the bustling streets of Los Angeles, he carried with him the knowledge that the true measure of success wasn't found in titles or trophies. It was found in the hearts of those whose lives had been touched, for the better, by the choices we make and the connections we forge along the way.